How are AI tools changing learning and instruction in rural school settings? What are some leadership norms in education that are perhaps worth challenging? How can I define my personal mission and guiding principles as an educator? Welcome back to another episode of the Teachers on Fire podcast, airing live on YouTube every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern. My name is Tim Cavey, and my mission here is to warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. Today's Teacher on Fire is Tyler Comeau. Tyler is a young school principal in rural Alberta, Canada, currently working on a doctorate in educational leadership. He is the creator of the Elemental Educator Podcast and is in the process of publishing his first book. Tyler strives to redefine education through a transformative lens as he challenges the status quo. Connect with Tyler and the Elemental Educator Podcast on X at Elemental EDUC, on Instagram at Elemental_Educator, on YouTube at Elemental Educator, and at his website, elementaleducator.com. Tyler, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Are you, sir, ready to light it up?
Absolutely, and I have to apologize for the tongue twisters I'm throwing at you this morning.
I kept wanting to say Elementor, but I think that's something else. Elemental Educator, there it is. Great brand. Well, I'm looking forward to getting into your work, both in the professional setting and in the content creation side of things. But before we go there, let's start with story time, Tyler. Share with us an experience of adversity that you've had somewhere in your personal or professional journey and describe how you overcame it.
You know, I've had a few come my way. One of the first ones being just the amount of times I've moved. So I grew up in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, went down to Olds, went down to Lethbridge, came up to Okotoks, Calgary, and now I'm in Lloydminster. The hardest one was when I was living in Calgary, working in Okotoks, loving my job. I was teaching junior high, just generalist, a bit of everything. Really got to get into the outdoor education. We were so close to the mountains, and so it was fun to just, plan some trips to go up a mountain every now and then, take the kids fishing, and it was a great time. And life led me to say, I'm going to move to Maidstone, Saskatchewan and see where things go. It didn't work out. I left my job. I got a new job in Lloydminster. And at the point of arriving in Maidstone, life changed. And I could have sat in that moment and said, oh man, this sucks. I could have threw myself a pity party, tried to come back to Calgary and seen how things would have went. But I sat there and went, you know what? I have a contract in Lloydminster. It's teaching something that I still like to teach. I get to teach science, which I love. And that's where, the alchemy of education comes from, and Elemental Educator is born. And I love teaching phys ed, and I got to be a part of a land-based cultural program. Let's roll with it, see how it goes. We'll try it for a year or two. And if at the end of that, it's still horrible, I'm going to pack up and we'll go again and we'll try something different, because you can choose to do that whenever you want. And through that process, I got my master's. I became an assistant principal into principalship. And now I'm on my doctorate. I have a beautiful family with, one kid who's just over 2 that we're potty training right now. So that's a whole nother whirlwind we could talk about. But we have another one on the way. And life couldn't be better with where we're at right now. So some of the hardest moments are where we see the biggest growth in ourselves.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you saw that through and you gave it an opportunity to grow, and look what has blossomed as a result. Thank you for sharing that story, Tyler. Well, this year you launched the Elemental Educator Podcast, now up to 19 episodes. I'm intrigued by your story there. You dropped a little bit about the origin story of the podcast. So tell us a little bit more about the elemental aspect, the elements, and your mission and vision with the podcast.
Yeah. So episode 20, by the way, is coming out on Monday. So that's a bit of a milestone for me. I get excited around some, I guess I like the by 10 numbers. So 20 is the big one for me, coming up here right away with Ryan, and make sure you check it out on Monday. It releases at 7 a.m. But 7 a.m. Mountain Standard, I should say as well. Elemental Educator. Oh man, I want to say it's been in the works for a while, but I finally brought it to fruition in February. And it stemmed from when I was teaching Science 9. We get to teach about the atoms and elements. And one of my favorite stories in that section is getting to talk about Aristotle, because he believed everything originated from these 4 elements. And Then Democritus opposed him, and Democritus was right the whole time, but we believed Aristotle forever. I have no idea why we chose to believe him. He was more popular. He was right on a couple other things. So we bought in and we believed him. And just the idea of these elements, something so simple being the creation of everything, really stuck with me. And at that point, I thought, well, it would be kind of cool to create some kind of spin-off where the elements are played in metaphors to teach something. And so I started structuring some of my classes around, well, what if? And I'm a big fan of Marvel, and they had that What If series, and I loved it. So I thought, well, what if it was the four elements, and what could that look like? And it was in my master's capstone class that I was spinning this idea off of what could these elements mean? What do they look like? What does the earth represent to us, and our air represent, and water represent, and fire represent? And if everything was made of these, that means they're in us, and we have all of these elements within us, and we're influenced by all of them externally. And somebody turned to me and said, "You need to write a book about this. This is a book." I said, "Yeah, you're right. This is." And I sat down and I started putting it out there, and it took off for me. It lit my fire. I was so passionate about wanting to explore this and write it down, and for the purpose of sharing it with everybody to see how can we just be better? How can we be innovative and creative and push the limits and challenge our expectations? And so from that, Elemental Educator was born, but it wasn't live yet. And it wasn't until I was in my own professional development, Morgan Michael was speaking to my school division. And she talked a lot about just taking that leap, take that risk, push yourself for it. And I went up to her after and I said, "Here's my plan. What do I do?" And she sat down and she said, "We need to talk. You need to get this going right away. Here's how you're going to do it." So we set up a meeting, figured things out. We got it all going. I launched the podcast on a whim, not knowing where it would go. So if you listen to the first 6 episodes, boy, are you going to hear some growth along the way on my own end as well.
Yeah.
But Elemental Educator was born, and it was the whole idea of I want to change the way we think about leadership and education. I want to challenge our status quos on what we're currently doing as what we think is best practice in education. And the best way to do that is to talk to people that have boots on the ground, talk to the educators, talk to the leaders, put yourself out there. And so it's a platform where I get to hear all these incredible stories that people are doing with the hopes of sharing it with everyone else.
That's amazing. And I'm just thinking about the expertise that you bring to the table, Tyler, with the teaching experience, the administrative and leadership experience, and you're in the literature as a doctoral student as well. So a lot of value at the Elemental Educator Podcast. And I have to congratulate you as well. And yes, you're absolutely right. The 10s are important. And even just to make it past the 10 mark, I think is actually quite significant. I can't remember the exact statistics, but I think most podcasters start to fade after something like 7. So you've made it past a critical juncture, and keep going, my friend. Again, that's the Elemental Educator Podcast. If you are tuned in to Teachers on Fire on the audio only version, maybe surf on over in your app while you're listening here and add the Elemental Educator to your list of subscriptions. Well, I want to talk more about mission and vision, and I'm thinking about you as a young principal. By the way, how old are you, Tyler?
I'm 31.
31. Okay. So one of the younger principals, if not the youngest that I've had on the show. I want to talk about this work of defining values, mission, and vision for a learning community. It seems that with every passing year of experience and reading and just listening to the world, I'm convinced these 3 things are absolutely critical for not just schools, but essentially any organization. So talk about what that looks like. How do you approach it as a young principal? And how do you, let's say, bring in the voices of your constituents and your community? How do you go about defining mission, maybe in visible forms around your school? I know this is a huge question, but drop us a few, give us a bit of a sense of how you approach this in your community.
Absolutely. And you know what, Tim, you need to take a step back first from looking at the big perspective, and you need to find your own mission, vision, and values first. So you have to look within yourself, and you have to say, you know what, throw your job aside, throw all the things you do as extracurricular aside. Look at the bare bones of your life. What is it that you're valuing? So for me, it's things like innovation, it's authenticity, it's discipline, it's transparency. Those are things that I value personally. And once I find my values, I can start to lead with them. I can start to engage with them. I can start to interact with them, and I can lean on them to get me through adversity. I can lean on them to push me through moments of change. That doesn't change once you enter a leadership role, once you enter a teacher role, once you enter an organization. you're bringing your values to that organization. That's why just about in almost every onboarding, they do Clifton Strengths or some other type of survey that tells you what kind of person you might be, or a personality test, because they want to know what you value, because they need to know how you're going to approach things, how you're going to interact with things. And you need to know that about your staff if you're a leader. You need to know, how are people going to root themselves? What is their core? What is their earth? And once you have that understanding, all you have to do is help them align it to what you're trying to do, what we're trying to do, to what's best for kids, to what's best for your outcome, to what's best for your organization in that moment. Because once they know their why you're doing something, and once they have alignment to their core values, the change process is quite easy. Overcoming the adversity is quite easy. Being there as a team is quite easy. So when I go into a new setting for the first time, I went to, I taught in Lloydminster my first year. Then I went to a different school as an assistant principal, and now I'm in a new school as a principal. So 3 schools in 3 years. You have to walk in with your values still. They don't change. And the mission, the vision of the new school, that's different. And some of them have a motto as well. But you need to read that, and you need to say, how do my values align with it? And what can it look like? And how can I be innovative and creative with those values in the same way? So you're not walking in and changing what people stand for. You should never do that. But what you should do is walk in and say, how can we create alignment with what we all stand for? What does it look like in a big picture? We need to collaborate. We need to have collective efficacy. We need to work together.
So good. I love that idea of really reaching down and making sure we understand ourselves, making sure we've defined our own mission and vision. And that's where I wanted to go next. Digging into your work a little bit, I can see that you've created a workshop around this exact topic for the individual educator. So zooming in from the macro to the micro, as it were, and talking about, hey, teachers, how can you define your own personal mission? Tell us a little bit more about the importance. You talked about, if I understood you correctly, you're talking about the importance of bringing that in as an education leader. What about that teacher who says, Tyler, why do I really need to have my own personal mission statement? Why is that helpful?
Yeah, great question, Tim. So first, if you head to elementaleducator.com, there's a tab at the top called Workshops, and you're able to navigate and look through some of them. The Earth Workshop is now live and coming very soon. I'm hopeful within the next month or the end of the 2 months here, we are going to be releasing the Air, the Water, and the Fire workshops as well. If you email me today, Tyler at elementaleducator.com, I will give you a coupon. Right now, the workshop is $50 Canadian. I will drop the price to $30 if you're able to reach out today. Say, hey, I listened to you to Teachers on Fire. I'd love that coupon code to go check it out. This workshop is meant for anybody. It's meant for the individual. It's meant for the organization. It's meant for small teams. It's meant for large teams. But it's the idea of finding your roots, finding your core. And any teacher knows that they need to create a family in their classroom. They need to create a positive culture. Any leader knows that they need to create a positive culture. They need to create that family setting. Any principal, any CEO prides themselves on positive and effective relationships, prides themselves on community engagement, prides themselves on making their stakeholders feel valued. We're not all great at doing that. Sometimes we get lost along the way. Sometimes we need to reflect and be reminded of, hey, are we doing best practice? Are we doing the right things? So this workshop was built with the idea of, how do you align yourself before you can start aligning with others and start collaborating? Because we need to figure out who we are. We need to figure out what we do and what we stand for and why we stand for it. And once we have all of that figured out, now we can be a part of our community. Now we can be engaging with our stakeholders in meaningful and powerful ways. Every decision that you make should be rooted to your values. Why did I choose to get a cup of coffee in the morning? Well, it's going to help me engage with Tim on the Teachers on Fire podcast. I want to show up for him with true authenticity, and I need to be myself and give you my best energy. So to do that, I'm going to make decisions rooted in my values that let me show up and perform, show up and be here in the present, and give you 100% of my efforts. So this workshop is really for anybody that's trying to figure out how they need to be showing up. It's not going to tell you your values. Okay, you need to figure that out on your own. That's really important to know. And your values are okay if they're different from everyone else's. But it's going to help you on that journey of self-discovery.
I like the sound of that a lot. I'm thinking about how, I see on teacher TikTok how sometimes the know your why is almost poked fun at. So we've heard a lot about the understand your why, but I do think for teachers to establish some clarity in this space and actually spell out, what am I all about? What do I bring to this school? What is that filter that is going to help me make decisions throughout the course of the year. That's a valuable prospect. And I'm even thinking, Tyler, about education leaders, building leaders. That might be a great professional learning event or experience to start the year with, it sounds to me like. Thank you for joining us, Teachers on Fire. If you're getting value from this conversation and from Tyler Comeau, my guest today, give this video a like. Tyler, one of your stated goals is to challenge the status quo of leadership norms. Can you share an example? Getting a little racy here, perhaps, but can you share an example of a leadership norm that, in your view, is up for review, something we need to change?
I want to talk about one that's changing already, and I'm happy to see it changing. I want to talk about supervision and evaluation of teachers. And I want to talk about it because it's so intimidating for a teacher that when their principal walks into their room and they're watching them, whether it's for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, the entire class, it can be overwhelming, and it can lead to underperformance. It can lead to flaws. You don't get authenticity. So challenging the status quo means we need to change that. That's not alignment. If you're intimidated by me coming into your room, we're not collaborating. If you're intimidated by me coming into your room, we do not have authenticity in an effective relationship. It needs to be welcoming. I need to be able to come into your room. You can simply turn and say, hey, how's it going? And I'm just going to jump right in and be willing to help. If people are scared that you're going into their room, it means you're not going in enough. You're not going in enough. You're not putting the work in to show them that you're willing to walk hand in hand with them through their struggles. You're not willing to be a coach, a leader, and help them along their adversity, their error. So one of the challenges of challenging the status quo is recognizing that there are still a lot of gaps and a lot of miscues and misfires in leadership practice. When I first got into administration, somebody gave me the quote. They said, "Don't be a carpet walker." And I thought about what that meant. And it came back to the idea of almost every classroom I've ever been in, with the exception of a couple. It's not carpet. It's a linoleum-based floor. It's a wood-based floor. It's something based. The carpet's in the office. And to not be a carpet walker means get out of your office. Spend your time out there with your teachers, with your kids, with your community. Challenge that status quo. Be different from what you've experienced.
What a great example of a leadership norm that needs to be challenged, Tyler. I follow a YouTuber, an educator on YouTube who happens to be based in Ontario. And some time ago, he published a personal vlog about the experience of being formally observed by an administrator. And just the wave of relief for him when it was over was just visceral. And you could feel it through his experience. And I just thought we need to change things when the observation and that whole experience terrifies teachers so badly. We've gone so far away from the mission of feedback and improvement and growth that we seek to put in place for our students. Why are we not adopting similar models for our teachers? So I love that. I'm sure we could talk for a whole show just about coaching and how that can look different. Let's talk about the content creator's journey at the podcast. Again, we celebrated the fact that you are now up to 20 episodes. I'm interested in this angle. How has the process contributed to your own professional growth?
It's huge. This has been the best professional development I could have ever sought out, and it just came so organically. I did the master's. I'm in the doctorate. You mentioned those. Those are great. They're titles at the end of the day. They're not actually giving me real world practical practices in ways to work with things. I'm getting the theory from it. But in terms of professional development, having these conversations with all of these educators, all of these consultants, it's so incredible to take in everybody's journey, everybody's story, everybody's influence, and then using it to make a data informed decision on my own end. Right? The favorite thing that people like to say right now is one-time PD does not work. It's not optimal. So getting that person to come in one time, it's not great. I get to sit here and, I've got episode 20 coming out right now. I just finished recording episode 37 last night with somebody. And I'm sitting here going, I just had the same professional development 37 times. I've had 37 powerful conversations. Right. And by the end of August, I'm hoping to have at the current number, it's 54 powerful conversations where I get to sit down with somebody for an incredible hour and hear their story and hear their journey and we get to navigate these elements, and I get to ask them all these questions that help me on my journey. How are you doing what you do? When you faced struggle, how did you overcome it? How are you implementing that change? How did you take that leap? How did you find that grit to really bite down and take that risk? I'm learning so much along the way myself that this is some of the most powerful work that I've got to be a part of.
I was writing this week about the fact that when you have a podcast, it gives you access to incredible speakers, authors, and minds in education. And so don't overlook that possibility. Educator, if you are listening out there, teacher on fire, and you're thinking about launching your own podcast, I know Tyler would join me in encouraging you to do exactly that. There's always room for one more, and no one does it exactly like you. So I would say yes to everything Tyler just mentioned. One more question before we get into a round of rapid fire questions, Tyler. I'm curious about your school environment, thinking particularly about the rural school communities that are out there. How have AI tools changed learning and instruction in your world, or have they?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim, because AI is a hot topic of conversation right now. And it's everywhere. And a lot of it is still seeking to understand what is it capable of, what can it do. We have this general idea that, it can do some really powerful things like help teachers create plans, help with differentiation, help with modification and adaptation. And so a lot of our work with AI is showing teachers how to leverage it to help bring some ease into their life, bring some comfort into their life. We can rid ourselves of the 3 hours of planning if there's a good piece of technology out there that's willing to just help a little bit. Now, us as the professional, we need to sift it. We need to navigate it. We need to make sure it's valid and reliable. We need to make sure that the data it's giving us is correct data that we want to use. We need to make sure it's aligned with our core values. We need to make sure it's aligned with our curriculums. But if there's tools out there that are willing to try to help, why would we not explore them? So it's about exposure. It's about showing people, hey, here's a couple things you could be trying, but it's also for kids, right? I see a future where essays are going to be incredibly invalid. And I would argue most of your classroom essays right now are invalid because kids can use AI to help write them. They become not authentic. It's no longer their words. It's no longer their voice. Now, the workaround to that is what can you give them to help them coach AI through writing a good essay? What kind of prompts are they entering? What kind of corrections are they making? Can they compare and contrast to AI generated essays? Now we're getting into some literacy content that's very powerful for people, right? It does the same thing for numeracy. It does the same thing for science, for social, right? It's all out there for everybody.
Teachers, if you're enjoying this conversation, consider adding the Teachers on Fire YouTube channel to your morning commute. Start your day on fire. All right, Tyler, we're moving into some rapid fire questions as we start to bring this conversation to a close. I suppose the first couple here may not be too rapid fire, but something I'm always interested in hearing from Teachers on Fire on the program is what is another area of learning for you outside of your professional learning, outside of the building, something that brings you alive as a human being?
Oh, goodness. I'm learning to be a dad, right? I've got a kid that's 2 years old. I've got another one on the way. And I am constantly learning about the ins and outs. Like I said, we're potty training right now. And so there's more learning on top of that. And it brings me so much energy. If you asked me when my kid was 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, maybe even within that first year, I was burnt out. I was tired. I was exhausted. I had so much learning to do. There was a ton of adversity coming my way. Doing all of that in the leadership role in the classes I was in, trying to launch something like this. It's a lot. That being said, I've started to look through it as a lens of I need to be excited and I need to show up. I need to be there for my family. And there's so much joy when you get to celebrate and your kids, they're laughing with you and they're so excited. So for me, I've really taken a leap into optimizing my parenthood, becoming the best father I can for my kids.
I like that word optimization, and that leads me to my next one. You're an impressive guy, Tyler. Let's face it. Your productivity is incredible. Tell us about maybe a daily habit, some kind of productivity hack, some sort of system that you've put in place that helps you be as productive as you are.
Yeah, I'm going to give a quick shout out to Aubrey Patterson. So if you guys don't know who Aubrey is, he used to be a school division superintendent, and then he started his own consulting called Warm Demanders. And I took one of his. I took his Warm Demanders coaching package course, and within it, he talks very strongly about the idea of time blocking and a meeting with yourself. And so, with intention, I set up meetings with myself to just go through my schedule, get things organized, and make sure I have dedicated time for even just me away from everything. And so, it's with intention that you're creating space in your day to have your own downtime away from people, away from technology. You're creating space in your day to go and work on your schedule, even being proactive in building that schedule. Man, it pays off so much in the long run because you sit there feeling planned. You don't feel the chaos. You're not missing and forgetting things. So I would say my biggest tip for people is consider time blocking. Consider a meeting with yourself.
Dave Ramsey says, give every dollar a name. Aubrey Patterson would say, give every hour a name. Point us to an edtech tool or app that you currently love using somewhere in your professional practice.
Yeah, I'll talk about two here. One that I've liked to use, and one that I'm curious about exploring. So one that I really like so far, it's called Nolej. So it's Nolej. And the idea of Nolej is you can upload any document to it. And through AI technology, it's going to analyze it, give you a summary, give you root words, give you flashcards for those, the definitions of some of the strong words. It's going to create a small assessment for you. And if you link in a video, it's going to create stopping points within it to stop and ask reflective questions for you. It's a very powerful tool that just, you put something in and it doesn't matter how big it is or what it looks like. It's going to analyze it and set it up as if it needed to teach it to you. So it's about giving you knowledge. And that's where its intricate name came from. The other one that I want to talk about is the idea. It just came to me recently, and I want to dive deeper into it. It's called WozEd. So it was created by Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. He's put out a STEM-based platform, and it's highly set up in the States right now, and it's taking off. But they're trying to launch it into Canada, so I'm nudging them a little bit to try to work on some Canadian curriculum for some alignment for us to bring meaning and help us align it with our core values as to why we should be bringing it in. But what he's doing is so powerful. It's the idea of, he's also challenging the status quo of education. He's trying to get more hands-on, more project-based, concept-based learning through STEM-based challenges.
Tell us about a book. Now, you are reading a lot, obviously, on the way to your doctoral, on the way to your PhD. But tell us about a book that has been deeply impactful to you personally or professionally, Tyler, either one you've been reading lately or one of your all-time faves.
I have two all-time faves, but I'll share one right now, and if you poke and prod, I might share the other one. I want to bring it back to the simple core value. I want to bring it back to the leader in me. So the leader in me, Stephen Covey. I want to bring it back to the idea of empowerment, the idea of collaboration. I interviewed Jethro Jones earlier this year. His episode with me is out now. He gave me this really powerful quote that I just loved. It's the idea that, well, the people at the bottom are busy competing. The people at the top are too busy collaborating. And it's that idea of empowerment. It's that idea of, how do we make people feel powerful? How do we make people feel like leaders? And how do we show them that they are leaders?
All right, I'm going to take the bait. What's the other title?
It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a... I'll
gotcha.
keep it PG for the show. It really helped me. I am somebody that, you can ask anybody that knows me if something goes wrong. One of my first steps when I was facing adversity was to talk about it over and over and over again and say, well, what does this look like? What does it mean? Where could it go? And that's how I dealt with it. And this book has helped me look at that and go, it doesn't matter yet. You don't know. Why are you thinking about the things you can't control? You need to take your steps forward. You need to focus on what you can control. You need to focus on you. And that's part of our earth. It brought me back to my whole element of earth.
So good. I've heard great reviews about that book. And yes, I've been perhaps scared off a little bit by the aggressive title, but I need to give it a read. Want to say a quick good morning to Josh Tovar in Texas, another great principal. Buenos dias, hermano, he says. Great to have you on board with us this morning, Josh. And next up, tell us about someone, Tyler, that we need to follow somewhere on social media, perhaps Education X, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok. I know certain platforms you are very intentionally, I'm sure, absent from, but tell us about someone who's inspiring you.
I am inspired by Selena Fisk, Dr. Selena Fisk. She is out of Australia. She has her own podcast on data-informed decision-making. We recorded an episode not too long ago where we hummed and hawed over, is it data or is it data? And what we came down to is we don't know. Everybody's going to say what they want to say. She speaks so powerfully around how to use information around you to make decisions. And her biggest point is you're not making a data-driven decision, you're making a data-informed decision. And how are you making sure you're informed correctly to optimize that decision you're trying to make? She was a teacher for 19 years, turned ed consultant for the last 5. She's an incredible journey. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can find her on Instagram. I don't think you can find her on TikTok. But she is also on Education X as well. So make sure that you check her out. She also has a website. It's selenafisk.com.
All right, selenafisk.com. Thank you for that shout out. And a similar question. I love asking this of fellow podcasters, Tyler. Who is a guest that really electrified you and inspired you? Someone who is a great speaker, or perhaps someone that you've seen really light up a stage that I need to have, that I need to host here on the Teachers on Fire podcast?
You know, you sent me this earlier and I was thinking about it, and I kept coming back to one person who I just thought they are perfect for you because they wrote a book about igniting your journey. So this guy's name is Vikas Narang. Vikas was a physiotherapist for 15 years in India before he just decided to uproot and go to Australia. He was a part of a film school, and now he's in the motivational speaking consulting side of things. And his book is that journey of self-discovery of how to ignite your own passions again. He would be an incredible guest for your show.
All right, I'll have to rewind this and listen to it carefully to make sure I get that name down, but thank you for that nomination. And just for fun, one of the last questions I like to ask my guests, Tyler, especially in these summer months when you've got no brain power left for anything productive, what are you streaming these days?
Yeah, Tim, another a good question. I'm probably not giving you an answer that you're going to like here that much. Between my time of wanting to be there with my family and really trying to launch my own Elemental Educator platform, I'm not sitting down and watching things. I'm not streaming that much. If you ask my partner, there's a lot of Love Island going on in the house right now. I've tuned myself out from a little bit. If you ask her, she might say that I caught an episode or 2 here or there. But that being said, I'm trying to dedicate the time I have with technology towards bolstering my platform and then making sure I'm putting the technology away to be there with my family.
Love that answer. Tyler, it's been a great conversation, and I hope we can continue this friendship, frankly, in the online spaces and as we both do different work in our respective school communities and on these online content platforms. What are the best ways for the Teachers on Fire listening to follow you?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I am probably most active on our Instagram, so Elemental_Educator. That being said, I do post on TikTok, Elemental Educator. I do post on Facebook, Elemental Educator. I do post on X, Elemental EDUC. And I do post on LinkedIn. That one's just under my name, Tyler Comeau. That being said, any of those platforms is great. I also recommend checking out our website, elementaleducator.com.
Sounds good, Tyler. Again, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with the podcast today. I know you've got the family demands, heard some little voices earlier, or one little voice earlier in the conversation. So I'm so glad that you are willing to take just a few minutes out of your Saturday to speak with me and share your insights with my guests today. Teachers on Fire, I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you decided to spend some of your day tuning into this podcast. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Tyler Comeau at the Elemental Educator sparked your thinking and ignited your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.